You were standing in line at a bodega on 34th Street when it happens. Not a dramatic line, just the kind of Tuesday morning shuffle where everyone is half awake and holding their coffee cups like life rafts. The guy in front of you is arguing with the cashier about a scratched lottery ticket. You're thinking about the report you have to finish before noon. You're thinking about whether you remembered to feed your neighbor's cat. You are, in every meaningful sense, nobody in particular. Then the news alert hits every phone in the store at once. Spiderman is dead. Not missing, not injured, dead. The alert is clinical in the way breaking news always is when the thing being reported is too large for language to hold. Spiderman, the masked vigilante who has protected New York City for approximately 11 years, was confirmed deceased this morning, following a confrontation with an unidentified assailant near the Williamsburg Bridge. Emergency personnel arrived on scene at 6:14 a.m. The identity of the hero remains unknown. The guy in front of you drops his lottery ticket. The cashier puts her hand over her mouth. Someone near the refrigerators says, "Oh my God," in a voice that is very small. You feel the grief too. Everyone does. But underneath it, simultaneous and immediate and deeply strange, you feel something else entirely. Something that makes no sense and every sense at once. You feel the specific, irreplaceable weight of a name, a face, a kid from Queens who used to do his homework on the fire escape because the apartment was too loud. Peter Parker is dead. And you are, as far as you can tell, the only person on Earth who knows that. You don't know when you figured it out. That's the strangest part. It wasn't a single revelation. It was an accumulation, a pattern you traced backwards. Years ago, you'd noticed that Spider-Man disappeared during final exam weeks at Empire State University. You'd noticed that the web fluid was a polymer composite, mechanically engineered, not biological, something a biology student might figure out, but a chemistry prodigy would perfect. You'd noticed the way he moved when he was tired, the slight drop in his left shoulder, which matched a mannerism you'd observed in exactly one other person, the nervous, wire-thin kid who sat 2 rows ahead of you in an undergraduate physics lecture 8 years ago. Peter Parker, who was always doing 3 things at once and apologizing for all of them. You never told anyone, partly because you weren't certain, not for years, and partly because the certainty, when it finally arrived, felt like something you had been given in trust, like finding someone's diary and choosing to close it. You held the knowledge quietly. You carried it the way you carry the things that are not yours to use. Now you are standing on 34th Street with a coffee you haven't touched, and the knowledge has changed shape entirely. It is no longer a secret, it is a responsibility. Because somewhere in this city, there are people who loved Peter Parker and do not know they are grieving him. There is an aunt who will be told only that her nephew is dead, without ever understanding what he sacrificed or why, or how many thousands of times he almost didn't come home before this final time. There are people alive today because of choices he made in the dark, and they will never know whose choices those were. And there is you, standing in a bodega, holding a secret that is now also a question. What do you do with a truth that belongs to a dead man? You walk out without buying anything. The cashier doesn't notice. The first week is the hardest because grief and obligation arrive together and they do not get along. You watch the city process Spider-Man's death the way cities process the deaths of symbols, enormous and public, and somehow impersonal. There are vigils in Times Square. There are flowers left on every bridge in the borough. The mayor gives a speech that is moving in the way speeches are moving when they are performed at the right pitch, which contains 0 true things about who Spider-Man was. There is a hashtag. There are arguments online about whether the city should build a statue and where it should go. You sit with your knowledge, and you do the math that nobody else can do. You calculate what it costs to hold this. You think about Peter Parker's aunt, May Parker, who lives in Forest Hills, whose nephew has just died in a manner the police will describe as circumstances unclear, and you understand that she is being left with an incomplete story.
The official record will say that Peter Parker, 29 years old, former freelance photographer, died in an unrelated incident near the Williamsburg Bridge on the same morning that Spider-Man died. Two separate tragedies. A coincidence? She will know it isn't a coincidence. She will know, the way people who love someone always know, that the shape of the absence is wrong. But she will have no language for it, no confirmation, no framework, just the specific torture of a truth you cannot name. You think about going to her. You draft the conversation in your head 17 times over 3 days, and every version falls apart at the same point. The moment where you explain that you recognized her nephew from a physics lecture, that you tracked his patterns over years, that you held his secret like it was yours to hold. Every version of that conversation sounds, when you hear it clearly, like something a dangerous person would say. You are not dangerous, but you are in possession of something that could become a weapon in the wrong hands, at the wrong moment, for the wrong reasons, and that knowledge changes how you move through the world, even now, even when no one is watching. So you wait, you watch, you try to understand what the shape of your responsibility actually is. It becomes clearer when the speculation starts. 3 weeks after Peter Parker's death, a journalist at a mid-level news outlet publishes a piece. The headline is careful, technically unprovable, but the argument is there. Was Spider-Man one of us? The case for an ordinary New Yorker. The piece is good. The journalist has done real work. They've noticed similar gaps, tracked similar patterns, but without your anchor point, they're circling. They name 4 possible candidates. Peter Parker is not one of them. The journalist has no idea how close they are and how far. You read the piece 3 times, then you close your laptop and sit with the fact that you now have a new problem, because the journalist is going to keep digging. Other journalists will pick it up. The speculation will narrow, and when it narrows far enough out, when someone finally traces the right variables to the right name, what gets published will not be a quiet truth shared in trust with a grieving family. It will be a story. It will be content. It will be something Peter Parker spent 11 years risking his life to prevent. You make a decision. It takes you most of a night to make it, and you make it badly, the way most real decisions are made, not cleanly, but with full awareness of the cost. You are going to protect his name. Not forever, not from everyone, but from the machinery of public consumption. You are going to be, in whatever limited way you can manage, the last line of defense between who he actually was and what the world will try to make him into. You start small, because starting small is the only option you have. You have no resources, no authority, no official standing. What you have is the knowledge, and the knowledge is a kind of leverage if you're careful about how you hold it. You begin by identifying which threads the journalist is following and which ones lead closest to the truth. You leave anonymous tips that redirect without lying, information that is accurate but that points toward the 4 candidates already named, reinforces plausible-seeming details about them, makes the trail widen instead of narrow. You are not framing anyone. You are not inventing evidence. You are introducing noise. It feels some mornings like exactly the kind of thing a good person wouldn't do. You do it anyway. The journalist publishes a follow-up piece that names a 5th candidate, not Peter Parker. You breathe. Months pass. The vigils end. The flowers are gone from the bridges. Spider-Man becomes history in the way that New York absorbs all its extraordinary things, completely, efficiently, without remainder. There is a mural in Brooklyn. There are retrospectives. There is a documentary in production that you will not be interviewed for. Life reassembles itself around the absence the way it always does, and you begin to understand that your job is not to tell the story, but to tend the silence. Tending the silence is more complicated than you expect it. It requires you to stay current in ways that feel strange and peripheral, monitoring the discourse, tracking which journalists are circling back, paying attention to any public record that could surface the wrong connection. You become very good at research in directions you never intended to develop. You learn the topography of the information landscape around Spider-Man's death the way a soldier learns terrain, not because you love it, but because your safety and someone else's legacy depends on knowing where the dangerous ground is. You also carry the weight of what you know about the people he saved. This is the part you didn't anticipate. Because you know who Peter Parker was, you can trace, roughly, which specific situations Spider-Man intervened in during the years you were paying attention. You know about the apartment fire in Greenpoint, where he pulled 6 people from a third-floor window. You know about the subway derailment 2 years ago, where he held a failing section of track long enough for 3 cars to clear. These people are walking around. They have no idea. They leave flowers at memorials for an abstraction, and the actual person who saved them is a footnote in the back pages of a local paper, mourned by a handful of people who couldn't fully mourn him because they didn't know what he was. There is a woman who was in that apartment fire. You found her by accident, following a different thread, and you have never made contact. You don't know what you would say. You don't know what it would cost her, or you, to say it. But you think about her sometimes. You think about what it would mean for her to know. Whether knowing would be a gift or a burden. Whether the truth, when it belongs to someone else's grief, is yours to give. You don't contact her, but you don't stop thinking about it either. 2 years after Peter Parker dies, something shifts. A researcher at a university, academic, low profile, apparently unconnected to the journalism ecosystem, publishes a paper in a communications journal about the semiotics of masked heroism and civilian identity. The paper is theoretical, careful, distant from any specific case, but buried in the methodology section is a framework for identifying covert civilian identity through behavioral pattern analysis that is, if applied to publicly available data about Spider-Man, devastatingly accurate. The researcher has not applied it, but someone will. You read the paper on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, you have done 3 things. You've created an anonymous academic profile and posted a methodological critique of the framework that is technically rigorous enough to discourage easy replication. You've flagged the paper to 2 contacts in the data privacy space who will organically raise concerns about the framework's ethical implications in public forums, slowing its adoption without suppressing it. Suppression would only draw attention. And you've made a decision you've been deferring for 2 years. You write a letter to May Parker. It takes you 11 drafts. The final version is 4 paragraphs. It says almost nothing that is verifiable and everything that is true. It says that you knew her nephew, briefly, years ago, and that you have reason to believe he was a person of extraordinary courage and extraordinary selflessness, who made choices that cost him his life in service to other people. It says that you cannot explain how you know this, and that you will not be signing your name, and that you understand this letter may mean nothing to her, or may mean something she is not ready for. It says only that you thought she should know that he was known, that the full shape of who he was is not invisible to everyone, that somewhere there is someone who sees it. You mail it from a post office 3 neighborhoods away from where you live. You pay cash. You walk home slowly, taking a route you don't usually take, and you feel, for the first time in 2 years, something that is not quite peace, but is adjacent to it. You have done one true thing. You have handed one piece of the knowledge back to someone it belonged to, in the only way that was safe and honest and kind. You don't know if she receives it. You don't know if she reads it. You don't know if it helps. You keep going anyway. 3.5 years out, the journalist, the original one, the one whose second piece named the wrong 5th candidate, publishes a book. It is a serious, well-researched account of Spider-Man's career as a public phenomenon. The identity question is in there, treated as genuinely unresolved, and the 4 original candidates are discussed without conclusion. Peter Parker appears nowhere in the text. The book receives good reviews. You read all of them. You feel something you are not sure how to name, Not pride, because none of this was your accomplishment, but something in the neighborhood of relief that keeps arriving in small doses and never quite accumulates into certainty. You understand by now that it never will. This is the nature of the thing you are doing. There is no end point. There is no moment where the secret is officially safe and your job is done. There are only more decisions, more mornings where you check the discourse and find either nothing or something that requires a response, more quiet recalibrations of how much protection is necessary and whether you are still doing this for the right reasons. You ask yourself that question more than you expected to. You ask it because the answer is not always obvious. There are days when tending this knowledge feels like an act of love, a final loyalty to someone you barely knew, a way of honoring what he chose and what it cost him. There are other days when it feels like an obsession dressed up in the language of obligation. You cannot always tell which day is which from the inside. What you know is that you are still the only person on earth who holds this knowledge, and the loneliness of that, the specific, unshared loneliness of a knowledge that can't be spoken aloud to anyone who would understand what it means, is something you carry alongside the responsibility and not separately from it. They are part of the same weight. They have always been. You are in a line at a different bodega now, different neighborhood. You've moved twice since that morning on 34th Street. The coffee is better here. The cashier knows your name. Outside, it's a Tuesday again, the same flat midweek light, and the city is doing what it always does, continuing without ceremony, absorbing its losses and its glories with equal efficiency, making room for the next thing and then the next. Someone near the door is reading something on their phone. You don't look. You've learned not to look at every screen like it might be the one that changes everything. You've learned to hold the vigilance loosely, to let it rest inside ordinary life without letting it swallow ordinary life whole. Peter Parker lived that way. You understand that now more than you did at the beginning. He was a person who held an extraordinary thing inside an ordinary life, who stood in lines and did homework and apologized for being late and went home to a small apartment and somehow also held the weight of the city on his hands on a daily basis. You are not him. What you carry is nothing like what he carried, but you have learned something in 3.5 years of tending his silence. It means you don't get to put it down. It means you don't get to pass it to someone else. It means you wake up every morning and the knowledge is there, still present, still yours, still asking the same question it asked you that first morning in a bodega on 34th Street. What do you do with the truth that belongs to a dead man? You haven't answered it completely. You don't think you're going to. But you've answered it enough to get through today, and you'll answer it enough tomorrow to get through that. And somewhere in Forest Hills there is a woman who received a letter she didn't fully understand, but kept anyway. You imagine she kept it. You have to imagine something. And somewhere in Greenpoint a woman is alive who doesn't know why. And somewhere under the Williamsburg Bridge there is a place in the concrete where the city has quietly continued over the evidence of the last morning of an extraordinary life. You pay for your coffee. You go out into the Tuesday. The city is loud and indifferent and familiar, and you move through it carrying the thing you carry, unnamed, unresolved, entirely yours.